Oh, good.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
This is kind of a weird formulation. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk about this book I just made, and we'll do like a Q&A thing. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know how all of you guys know my work, but this is a little bit of an uncharacteristic book for me. Most of the work I've done over the years has been like somewhat more character-focused, like fantasy adventure type storytelling, whereas this is just like one weird, gross little horror story about a guy in a box, right? It's always weird to do a book with a publisher because there's this long span of time between finishing the thing and having it out there and having people see it, you know? Most of my work I serialize online as I draw it, which means I'm hearing something back immediately as I do, you know, each page or each little chunk of it. I like that. It's kind of disorienting to have this book out now and be so out of the headspace in which I made it, right? It was such a fucking COVID, world is ending, my life is collapsing sort of headspace that I was in when I made this thing. You know, we were all living through a sort of apocalypse on different levels, and we were all having, you know, a million conversations about what it looked like to us and how far it would collapse, or at least I was, you know. So it's weird to read through this thing now after not having really looked at it in probably a year and remember that headspace. Let's see. I started making this comic on the basis of a sort of a dream, or like a, what do they call it, hypnagogic proto dream, where you're like falling asleep and stuff has a sort of weird clarity. I try not to be like superstitious or metaphysical about it, but I have always tried to hold on to stuff like that and take seriously what my brain is doing outside of my direct focus. So I had an idea of like a delivery into a big horrible hell house and a sense of an aesthetic, right? I sort of folded into that is a lot of media that I like intentionally in a focused way tried to take in to build that aesthetic. Ordinarily it's hard for me to address like the influences question, which is like the number one most common question that people making art get probably. But with this book, I was like, I know what I want this to look like. I know other things that are trying to do what I'm doing. So I read some Kafka books and watched a bunch of Terry Gilliam and Fellini. And also there's a lot of early Betty Boop cartoons in this. There's an overt like Betty Boop fan character in this book. You'll know when you see her. And then another big part of it is I was reading Dragon Ball, the whole thing, for the first time when I was thumbnailing this book, when I was doing the preliminary drawings for this whole book. I've read stuff that's, you know, directly influenced by Dragon Ball. I've read a lot of different action comics. I've never been hit by something as hard as that fucking comic. The storytelling is so beautiful and the motion is so perfect, and like it absolutely informed my my sense of motion through this book, in which there's a lot of like falling and being being physically endangered, and like movement and action in a way that I had never really done before. So enormous thanks to Mr. Toriyama, may he rest in peace. And I guess the last thing I want to say, improvisation is something that I'm thinking about a lot more consciously now than I was several years ago. I started to think about it harder around when I was starting this book. So when I started this book, I had done this trilogy of books for first, second books called Island Book, which is, they're like a middle grade adventure thing. The way that making a book for a publisher usually works is you plan out the whole thing, you get the okay from your editor on every little phase of it, and then you execute upon the plan, right? It goes okay, it went okay, but it's a little bit of a deadening process to me at scale. I more openly like doing stuff that just explores a huge space at length now. Last Delivery, I wanted that dreamy, improvisatory quality, but I'm doing it for a publisher, so they need some sense of like what it's going to look like to okay, you know? Basically what that amounted to is Spike, who's the main person who is the publisher, Iron Circus, generally trusts my judgment well enough that I like could give her an outline of the whole thing and then just like change it and like fuck with it and mess around with it throughout the course of the thing. And as a result, I think it feels rambly and unpredictable in a way that is probably not for everybody, but it is in the way that I wanted. Process-wise, I have several original pages here. You're free to flip through if you like. It's all drawn with ink and brush pen. This pen here, probably, or one like it. And I did like texture over everything with a grease pencil or a China marker. Not a way that I've worked on anything before, really. Made the whole process very difficult in certain ways and very difficult for the print technician, but looks cool. That's basically it. I want to thank you all so much for being here. I've not done an event like this in well over 10 years. This is a little daunting and weird for me, but thank you. Thank you, Gabby and Noah, Sea and Soil, for having me. Thank you, Spike and Matt and Kel and Hi for helping make the book happen publisher-wise. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about this book. Happy to do some back and forth with y'all if you want, or whatever you want. Thank you guys for being here. I'm drinking a beer now. I've really almost sold out of these. I brought like the perfect amount, I think. Thank you.
You said that things change with your purchase in your book, but can you talk a little bit about how things change?
How things change.
What the pre...
There's a lot of stuff where I'm just not in the headspace at all anymore, so I don't remember. It's probably all just like granular stuff. Like the book is such a just physical passage from one space into the other that it was probably just like choreography shit. Yeah, I mean it's the arc feels like self-evident to me. I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but it's such a simple just progression into the depths, you know. It felt self-evident to me. I love that, having an idea that's like super crystallized and just like having some guidepost to build on because it's so crystallized.
I guess one of the benefits of not serializing is that you could, if you have the whole idea, you can do it in any order. But if you're leading into improv, does that mean you did it? You start in page one and then you finish at the last? Does that tell you did it all the same, even when you didn't have to, as it were?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I do have to go in order. I mean, it helps with continuity, I find. A big part of the book is that the guy is suffering a succession of visible injuries and like deteriorating, and it helps with continuity for that. But also, like, I do like being in the structure of the thing and not disorienting myself, and like character acting is something that is a huge part of making comics to me that I don't see people talk about as a big part of comics, and it helps me to try to be in where the character's at psychologically through the process. But doing these books for publishers, I work front to back, but I do like a chunk at a time. Pencil like a scene and then ink it, which is a helpful, I don't know, I prefer working that way, I think.
I guess related, like, do you have to go back and change things, but that's also kind of counter to that instinct to just let things be as they've arisen.
I don't think I had to go back and change anything for this.
Okay.
No, here's the thing. There's one note that Spike had about something that I could, Spike is the publisher, about something that I could redraw to clarify, and I just totally neglected to do it. And no one noticed, so, or no one told me that I had to, so. It was, yeah, it was this part where this platform that they're sitting on explodes.
Okay.
And Spike told me, it's not totally clear that this is the same platform that they're on. And I'm like, fair enough, I think that is a good point. But I think I just kind of forgot. And it's so like, it feels so psychologically delicate. I was in the zone for the book, and it's such a, I could not imagine getting back in the zone, you know? Oh, any other thoughts, anybody? Yo.
You said the print technician had trouble with grease pencil. How did that process work? Were you sending scan things to scan fresh, they came back to the color, and then sent the digital press?
Yes, so I delivered the art for this in a way that was sort of built on how I learned how to deliver art for First Second, the big publisher I'd worked with, where I send a separate file of the inks and the colors, and then, because the inks are all in K and the colors are all in CMY, right? So they're printed, the printer lays them out one on top of the other. Because the inks here are not just flat black or white, there's all these like weird textures. It made it like complicated, or it made it difficult for me to represent on the screen exactly what I wanted to. I forget exactly, and it was like not my department at that point. But it came out fucking great, I think. I don't know. It looks how I wanted it to look, so. The file sizes end up being like literally 10 or 20 times bigger than I am used to, just because of the quality, the texture of the inks.
Yeah. Since you stated that like this kind of story is very different from what you usually do, did you find any difficulties kind of approaching this kind of narrative compared to other works you've done?
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of like a relief to like relax certain uptight ways of thinking and writing that I think I ordinarily have, and to allow myself to be driven through it just by some weird emotional thread, you know.
Okay.
But I could not sustain it up for a longer thing than this, you know. Like it only works to me because it's so tied into like one simple trajectory, and it's outside of my ordinary voice. It wasn't really difficult, but I don't think I could do more of it, you know, unless something really clicked.
Okay.
So I understand this one's more improvisational, but even though it was improvisational in nature, and really I guess this could go for any of your works, do you typically, when you start to have an idea for a comic or a series or whatever, do you typically begin with the scripting stage, or do you draw just characters and think about the plot and the dialogue afterwards? Do you develop the cultures and the setting, or the artifacts or whatever, like all that juicy Tolkien detail stuff first, or do you think about just like, no, I'll just think about events and dialogue as I go along, and you know, I'll worry about that first?
That has varied a whole lot. I basically unqualifiedly reject the typical fantasy writer nerd thing of build the whole world in detail and then tell a story. I dislike that. Typically, I will start with some character or some like evocative imagey thing, but it varies. I mean, with this, it was like the sense of the little guy in the big fucked up house. With Third Voice, which is the thing that's my whole life for the past year and a half, I started with like the sense of these two characters in a sort of marginal space in this like apocalyptic world. But it's like something like that, you know. and then everything has to be in service of that. And I try to work wide to tight, like have a big picture sense of it, and not lose sight of any particular part of it as I'm tightening up. Like I can spend a lot of time doing like dialogue, but it does come down to like fitting it into a comic, you know, and a comic is not just dialogue, it has to fit into the structure of the thing.
So you'd say you like draw the characters and stuff and just the vibe first before you don't really write out like a manuscript and everything first.
It really varies moment to moment.
Yeah.
Third Voice is very dialogue-y, so I do a lot of like writing dialogue and then make it fit into the structure. Last Delivery, there's so much like physicality and like physical humor shit that dialogue is very secondary, and it's just sort of like filling in the space of that sometimes it feels like. But I think it has to vary. It has to vary for me, yeah. Anybody else? No.
I'm actually just a little curious on the topic of like dialogue. Like, how do you consider dialogue for comics versus dialogue for like an audio medium? Like, do you focus on how the flow of the words sound in your head, or how they look on the page, or what any sort of consideration, sort of in any direction in that, or just?
I mean, it has to. It's how it sounds. I don't think that much about how it looks. I mean, I try to break it. I hate a big block of text in a visual medium, so I break it up in that sort of sense, and I try to break it up in terms of keeping the acting of the characters engaged with what is being said, you know, like, so it personally annoys me when like the emotional thrust of a block of text changes dramatically mid-balloon. Does that make sense?
Yes, because the different thoughts or different feelings.
And you have the image of the person talking or whatever that is relating to the text there, you know? I just like emphasizing that interplay as much as possible. I don't have a strong like auditory imaginal sense, but I like language. I like fixating on making it sound right in that kind of way. I don't know. It feels sometimes like writing for a play, like a stage play, because I don't know why. It feels more like that than writing like a prose novel, I guess.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay.
Oh.
With the using the grease pencil for texture and everything, is that something that was part of the like initial vision for this when it came to you? Did you have to experiment to kind of get the look that you wanted?
I don't know. I'm overselling the initial vision idea. Maybe it's not magic. It's just like.
Well, I guess was it something? Was it a look you were already working with for other things, or was it something that you
Yeah.
specifically developed for this project?
I had used it a little bit for other things. I'd been using a China marker like in sketchbooks since like college. It's a really weird tool. It is not designed for this sort of like highly developed drawing at all. It's like it sucks. And it's like unpredictable, and like the tip of it has to be molded in a particular. It sucks, but I like the texture of it, and I like how shitty it looks, and I don't know. It's just one of the things that was in my head. Like, this is a textural thing that I could apply to something, and then I had this idea for this thing, and it made sense to use that to emphasize the aesthetic in a way that. You know, they just line up. You end up with a bunch of stuff in your head, and it lines up or it doesn't. Like with Harrowing of Hell, that book, my last book with Iron Circus, which is like a sort of an adaptation of a bunch of weird Christian shit. It's all in brush, but it's like a particular red and black, and it's been in my head that I want to do something with like an intense symbolic spot color, but otherwise black and white. For years, that was in my head, and I'm like, it lines up, you know. Yo.
All the talk about with the grease pencil, which again I've never seen you use in the comics before, and it was really interesting to see. Are there any particular forms of traditional media that you've been wanting to work more in the future?
I feel like I figured it out now. I've got my little tools. I don't know. My mom for my birthday, literally almost a year ago, ordered me a set of like technical pens, and they were like back ordered. I'm always using these obsolete tools that people don't reliably manufactured anymore, so it took like 6 months for them to get to me, and I've been using them lately to do like lettering and panel borders and stuff, because those felt tip microns wear out after like a day.
Yeah.
So that's the big new thing for me lately. It's very nerdy, but it's changed my life a little bit. But I feel pretty stuck. The thing is also that I have no framework now. I've committed so much to this third voice thing. I have there's not really in my brain any like I'm going to do another book, you know. Maybe something will come up or whatever, but I've been working on one thing in a really focused way for a while now, and I feel like I have a system down pretty good for it. I didn't talk about that at all. I don't know, however you guys know my work or whatever, the main thing I'm doing is Third Voice, which you can read for free. I recommend that you read it for free. Don't buy anything, just read it. Take a card. It's nothing like this book at all, but I think it's really good. Any other questions, anybody? No.
Sorry if this is a ridiculously abstract question, but thoughts on horror in a comic format? Because you can't do pace, you can't control the pace one reads at, and you can't do the novel trick of only partially describing things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can do things like that, though. I mean, drawing is a kind of describing, you know. There's a literalism built into it, but kind of. I don't consider myself very horror literate at all. It makes me uncomfortable to watch most horror movies and stuff. But I like the sort of thematic structure of it, of like, I don't know, I like what it provides story-wise. I don't know. I mean, the like jump scare thing doesn't really interest me, so it wouldn't occur to me to try to do that in comics. Yeah, I don't consider myself very horror literate, so I don't know what to say to that other than that, really.
I mean, you described the mindset of the book very well, so you said that.
Okay.
So the comics are makes it more immersive in that the readers control the things. It's their fault when things get worse.
Oh, there is that,
Their
yeah.
page turn. Just like the monster at the end of the book. There you go.
Man, I read...
Junji Ito, all that.
Yeah. Have any of y'all read Berserk at all?
Yeah.
This is a Berserk literate crowd, right? That book has a lot of like horror shit in it, and there is a sense of like, I don't know, it's a deeper kind of involvement with the storytelling in that medium, I think, than other media. You feel like really you can flip through it and see the whole trajectory, and you can like move forward at the pace you're moving forward. I love that fucking comic, man. Changed my life. I haven't read the whole thing even. I read it before I made this, I think. Anyway, it's changed how I think about comics in some ways. Okay, anybody else?
I'll keep going. I thought you were-
Didn't have my hand.
what was it like approaching like a publisher? Like, what's the difference between when you go to a publisher who makes comics versus like what's the process of telling them? Like, do they come to you and just see your work, or do you like go to them and say, I have a thing, and
Yeah.
you know, like, how does it?
Question is, what is it like going to a publisher? Is it different? I mean,
Like, what's the real fundamental difference, like approaching a publisher versus like putting it out there on your
Yeah.
own? Like,
okay, what's the difference?
do they come to you? Do you come to them?
What's the difference between self-publishing and going to a publisher, and do they come to you? Do I go to them? I've had different relationships with different publishers. When I was starting out, it was in my head, like it's in a lot of people's heads, that like I'm going to get my shit published and then I will have a career, right? This is not how it has worked at all. I have gotten some things published and made some money on advances here and there, but the backbone of my stuff is my self-published thing that I just like put on the internet. I would not have a career if not for that. You know, I would have a career if not for these books with publishers. Do they come to me? I mean, I've pitched stuff to publishers sight unseen, and it's never worked. But the books that I have made with publishers have only happened because they're specifically interested in what I'm doing, because I have been self-publishing it, basically.
So they saw your work, and then they reached out to you after
Basically.
they saw your self-published work.
Exactly, yes. That's what happened with First Second, the Macmillan's graphic novel arm. Iron Circuits is a little bit of a weird case because that is true that like they're interested in publishing me because they've seen my work already, but also like I just know them personally, so I'm like I'm in the tank already. Yeah, maybe there's something actionable in that. Like you know, publishers get millions of blind submissions if their submissions are open, you know, but it doesn't necessarily make a career to have this or that institution sign off on what you're doing. The thing in this industry, the thing that can make a career is just committing in a sensible, not too self-destructive way to doing your work. This is what I said all semester. You've heard this a million times. Yes. So it's, I don't know, it's nice to now have relationships with publishers where I'm not like, I've been self-publishing long enough that I have some sense of like what they can offer and what the value of the relationship is and like how to keep it healthy, I guess, or try to. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts, everybody? I appreciate you all being here. I guess I'm going to hang around more. I got 4 more books. This has been fun.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yay.